Blessings, women. Welcome back to Bridge. On the world stage right now, we are witnessing the utter dysfunction of our male leaders as they vie to outflex one another's patriarchal muscles in an attempt to assuage their own wounded egos. But with global crisis hanging in the balance, people are no longer satisfied with being given the role of witness, while those in power pursue their own agendas. This predatory capitalism that has been the perpetrator of women for thousands of years is in the process of dismantling itself because those it has colonized with its false gods and false belonging are no longer willing to remain complicit, silenced, or oppressed. My teacher, Amanda Scott, wrote recently that, and I quote, "Evolution takes place under moments of intense pressure, and this moment is about as intense as it gets. Humanity is ready for the next evolutionary step of consciousness, which until now has been run by the concept that we'll make the breakthrough if we just meditate for longer or think more deeply into philosophy. And that just doesn't cut it anymore. We have to let go of the idea that just because we're human and we think, we're the pinnacle of conscious evolution to date. That means we have all the answers. We need to learn how to live in context again." End quote. Living in context means relating to the world through the body. Embodiment, however, in our current cultural narrative, has suffered the same fate as knowledge, resources, and rights. It has been enclosed, a principle foundational to colonialism. Because North America is societally based on these methodologies of power over, the same paradigm that has enslaved women with the belief that their bodies are sinful and shameful, that they are inferior and therefore created only to serve men, if we are to learn how to live in context again, we must first disclose the body. As Sue Monk Kidd writes in The Dance of the Dissident Daughter, "We've been excluded from creating symbol and myth, from the meaning-making processes that explains and interprets reality. In order for women to find embodiment in the world, we must create one which is oriented towards and therefore able to receive them, us. And this requires rewriting the story we have all been conditioned under. There is an old adage that states, no problem can be solved from the mindset that created it. The crisis we find ourselves in globally right now cannot be solved by the masculine. And I don't mean in terms of gender. I mean in terms of qualities. That was the old paradigm, the one that has landed us here at the crux of extinction or emergence. The future, therefore, is feminine, not in gender, but in mindset. It is inclusive, intuitive, receptive, relational, emotional, liminal, cyclical, nonlinear. It is fully embodied. Because, as Virginia Woolf once said, we think back through our mothers and grandmothers if we are women. To renounce the cultural contracts and agreements we have been imprisoned by for the last 2,000 years means we would also be healing generations of ancestral trauma. We would be healing the witch wound. I was recently listening to an interview with Brené Brown in which she discussed her main concern with humanity, that people opt for causing pain rather than feeling it, and that, quote, because we've lost our capacity for pain and discomfort, we have transformed that pain into hatred and blame, end quote. which of course is what we are seeing played out in our political arena as we speak. This loss of capacity to hold space for pain stems from our fear of the vulnerability it takes to do it, because vulnerability has long been shunned as a weakness, as feminine. Until now, it has not been safe to show up in society as anything that resembles what our patriarchal institutions, created by and for men, have renounced as feminine, i.e., whatever's threatening to the schematics that keep them in power. And so, our only option under a power over paradigm has been to move into resistance, the opposite of flow, of softness, of openness, of the body of woman. To return to the point that no problem can be solved from the mindset that created it, by necessity, by the pressure of evolution upon our consciousness to either change or decline into extinction, we are moving out of this paradigm. Yet, as Amanda Scott goes on to say, if we could envisage where we need to get, it wouldn't be a big enough change from where we are. So we need to get to a place we don't know and can't imagine. In other words, we have outgrown our current overculture. Its systems of enclosure have kept us so underdeveloped, to even attempt to grow from within it would be futile. Rather, the future has to arise from crossing over a threshold into something we have never experienced before, into the age of the sacred feminine, into a place of inclusion, intuition, receptivity, relationality, emotion, liminality, cyclicity, non-linearity, embodiment. Every woman is a bridge. We are literally being called back into our bodies, back into everything it means to be a woman, in order to carry the world, to bridge the world over into its next era of consciousness. When we start to shed the armor of what Sue Monk Kidd calls the cultural blueprints of womanhood, the patterns of creating ourselves that have functioned as our primary way of receiving validation, we can experience profound disillusionment, debilitating insecurity, and the loss of a sense of self. And so it is imperative, in the spirit of embodiment, in the spirit of turning towards and touching into our pain and discomfort, so that we may build not just the capacity but compassion for it, that we tend to the lungs, what in traditional Chinese medicine is the site which emotional residue of these forms of grief can become stagnant in. So I want to finish here with a lung tending practice, and it's an acupressure point called the letting go point, and it's along the lung meridians. And the lung meridians run just along the underside of the clavicle, the collarbone. The way to get to this specific acupressure point, which again, it's called the letting go point. So if you're giving yourself some gentle pressure there between 30 seconds to 3 minutes, it can help to release that residue of grief and loss in the lungs. So the easy place to find it is hands in the underarms where your thumbs land. There should probably be a pretty tender point right underneath the clavicle, the collarbone. So once you've found that point, you can take your hands out and use your thumbs to get into and massage that point. So you may need to move around a little bit. Generally, this does give you the point. So once you're at the letting go point, using your thumbs, gentle circles, and just release and shrug the shoulders down and away and breathe deeply. So this acupressure point really can help to mobilize any congestion, not physical congestion, but emotional congestion. So again, grief, loss, burden from the lungs. So that is the letting go point. And what I would recommend is asking yourself a question as you work with this daily in this transitional period we find ourselves in globally. And I'll give you that question, but first, let me just frame it this way. Brene Brown, once again, she reminds us if you hold fear in front of you, it doesn't dictate your behavior. So, to reframe this into a question as you're working with your letting go point, you can ask yourself, what emotion is presenting itself that I am now ready to feel in my body rather than intellectualize in my mind? You can print off the accompanying bridge card with that question on it to work with as you continue processing, integrating, healing, and changing this cultural narrative as we move into the next era of the sacred feminine. Bone to bone, blood to bud, limb to limb, thus be they fitted together. Bionochin, blessings, women.